New York, New York, 12 April 1951. Collector of Internal Revenue, Divisional Office, Bangor, Maine. Dear Sir, I have your notice about a payment of $200 and some odd that you say is owing on my 1948 income tax. You say a warrant has been issued for the seizure and sale of my place in Maine. But I don't know as you realize how awkward that would be right at this time. Because in the same mail, I also received a notice from the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals here in New York, taking me to task for harboring an unlicensed dog in my apartment. And I have written them saying that Minnie is licensed in Maine. But if you seize and sell my place, it is going to make me look pretty silly with the society, isn't it? Why would I license a dog in Maine, they will say, if I don't live there? I think it is a fair question. I have written the society, but purposely did not mention the warrant of seizure and sale. I didn't want to mix them up, and it might have sounded like just some sort of cock and bull story. I have always paid my taxes promptly, and the society would think I was kidding or something. Anyway, the way the situation shapes up is this. I am being accused in New York State of dodging my dog tax, and accused in Maine of being behind in my federal tax. And I believe I'm going to have to rearrange my life somehow or other so that everything can be brought together all in one state. Maybe Delaware or some state like that, as it is too confusing for everybody this way. Minnie, who is very sensitive to my moods, knows there is something wrong and that I feel terrible. And now she feels terrible. The other day, it was the funniest thing. I was packing a suitcase for a trip home to Maine, and the suitcase was lying open on the floor, and when I wasn't looking, she went and got in and lay down. Don't you think that was cute? If you seize the place, there are a couple of things I ought to explain. At the head of the kitchen stairs, you will find an awfully queer box-like thing. I don't want you to get a false idea about it, as it looks like a coffin, only it has a partition inside and two small doors on one side. I don't suppose there's another box like it in the entire world. I built it myself. I made it many years ago as a dormitory for two snug-haired dachshunds, both of whom suffered from night chill. Night chill is the most prevalent dachshund disorder, if you've never had one. Both these dogs, as a matter of fact, had rheumatoid tendencies, as well as a great many other tendencies, especially Fred. He's dead, damn it. I would feel a lot better this morning if I could just see Fred's face, as he would know instantly that I was in trouble with the authorities and would be all over the place, hamming it up. He was something. About the tax money, it was an oversight or a mix-up. Your notice says that the first notice was sent last summer. I think that is correct, but when it arrived, I didn't know what it meant, as I am no mind reader. It was cryptic. So I sent it to a lawyer, fool fashion, and asked him if he knew what it meant. I asked him if it was a tax bill and shouldn't I pay it, and he wrote back and said, no, it isn't a tax bill. He advised me to wait till I got a bill and then pay it. Well, that was all right, but I was building a small hen house at the time, and when I get building something with my own hands, I lose all sense of time and place. I don't even show up for meals. Give me some tools and some second-handed lumber, and I get completely absorbed in what I'm doing. The first thing I knew, the summer was gone and the fall was gone, and it was winter. The lawyer must have been building something too, because I never heard another word from him. To make a long story short, I am sorry about this non-payment, but you've got to see the whole picture to understand it. Got to see my side of it. Of course I will forward the money if you haven't seized and sold the place in the meantime. If you have, there are a couple of other things on my mind. In the barn, at the far end of the tie-ups, there is a goose sitting on eggs. She is a young goose, and I hope you can manage everything so as not to disturb her until she has brought off her goslings. I'll give you one if you want. Or would they belong to the federal government anyway, even though the eggs were laid before the notice was mailed? The cold frames are ready, and pretty soon you ought to transplant the young broccoli and tomato plants and my wife's petunias from the flats in the kitchen into the frames to harden them. Fred's grave is down in the alder thicket beyond the dump. You have to go down there every once in a while and straighten the headstone. which is nothing but a couple of old bricks that came out of a chimney. Fred was restless, and his headstone is the same way. Doesn't stay quiet. You have to keep at it. I am sore about your note, which didn't seem friendly. I am a friendly taxpayer and do not think the government should take a threatening tone, at least until we have exchanged a couple of letters kicking the thing around. Then it might be all right to talk about selling the place if I prove stubborn. I showed the lawyer your notice about the warrant of seizure and sale, and you know what he said? He said, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything, it's just a form." What a crazy way to look at a piece of plain English. I honestly worry about lawyers. They never write plain English themselves, and when you give them a bit of plain English to read, they say, "Don't worry, doesn't mean anything." They're hopeless, don't you think they are? To me, a word is a word, and I wouldn't dream of writing anything like, "I am going to get out a warrant to seize and sell your place," unless I meant it. And I can't believe that my government would either. The best way to get into the house is through the woodshed, as there is an old crocus sack nailed on the bottom step, and you can wipe the mud off on it. Also, when you go in through the woodshed, you land in the back kitchen right next to the cookie jar with Mrs. Freethy's cookies. Help yourself, they're wonderful. Sincerely yours, E.B. White. On a Florida key. During the 1920s and 30s, Florida experienced a tremendous real estate boom, followed by an equally large bust. Many developments, even cities, were laid out, and the streets and sidewalks built. When the land did not sell, the developers left, abandoning the work to the encroaching jungle. I've always liked these final paragraphs from the larger essay on a Florida key, written in 1941, which describes these vanishing ruins. Although I am no archaeologist, I love Florida as much for the remains of her unfinished cities as for the bright cabanas on her beaches. I love to prowl the dead sidewalks that run off into the live jungle, under the broiling sun of noon, where the cabbage palms throw their spiny shade across the stillborn streets, and the creepers bind old curbstones in a fierce sensual embrace, and the mockingbirds dwell in song upon the remembered grandeur of real estate's purple hour. A boulevard which has been reclaimed by nature is an exciting avenue. It breathes a strange prophetic perfume, as of some century still to come, when the birds will remember, and the spiders, and the little quick lizards that toast themselves on the smooth, hard surfaces that once held the impossible dreams of men. Here along these bristling walks is a decayed symmetry in a living forest, straight lines softened by a kindly and haphazard nature, pavements nourishing life with the beginnings of topsoil, the cracks in the walks possessed by root structures, the brilliant blossoms of the domesticated vine run wild, and overhead the turkey buzzard in the clear sky on quiet wings, awaiting new mammalian death among the hibiscus, the yucca, the Spanish bayonet, and the palm. I remember the wonderful days and the tall dream of Rainbow's End. The offices with the wall charts, the pins in the charts, the orchestras playing gently to prepare the soul of the wanderer for the mysteries of subdivision, the free bus service to the Rainbow's beginning, the luncheon served on the little tables under the trees, the warm, sweet air so full of the deadly contagion, the dotted line, the signature, and the premonitory qualms, and the shadow of the buzzard in the wild, wide Florida sky. I love these rudimentary cities that were conceived in haste and greed and never rose to suffer the scarifying effects of human habitation. Cities of not quite forgotten hopes, untouched by neon and by filth. And I love the beaches, too, out beyond the cottage colony, where they are wild and free still, visited by the sandpipers that retreat before each wave like children, and by an occasional hip-sprung farm wife hunting shells, or sometimes by a veteran digging for Donax variabilis to take back to his hungry mate in the trailer camp. The sound of the sea is the most time-effacing sound there is. The centuries re-roll in a cloud, and the earth becomes green again when you listen, with eyes shut to the sea. A young green time when the water and the land were just getting acquainted and had known each other for only a few billion years, and the mollusks were just beginning to dip and creep in the shallows. And now man the invertebrate, under his ribbed umbrella, anoints himself with oil and pulls on his Polaroid glasses to stop the glare, and stretches out his long brown body at ease upon a towel on the warm sand and listens. The sea answers all questions, and always in the same way. For when you read in the papers the interminable discussions and the bickering and the prognostications and the turmoil, the disagreements and the fateful decisions and agreements and the plans and the programs and the threats and the counter-threats, then you close your eyes and the sea dispatches one more big roller in the unbroken line since the beginning of the world. And it combs and breaks and returns foaming and saying, "So soon?" I paint what I see. Nelson Rockefeller commissioned Diego Rivera to paint a large mural on the RCA building in the early 30s. When the face of Lenin appeared in the mural, Rockefeller complained that he should have some say as to the images appearing on his wall. I paint what I see, a ballad of artistic integrity on the occasion of the removal of some rather expensive murals from the RCA building in the year 1933. "What do you paint when you paint on a wall?" said John Dee's grandson Nelson. "Do you paint just anything there at all? Will there be any doves or a tree in fall or a hunting scene like an English hall?" "I paint what I see," said Rivera. "What are the colors you use when you paint?" said John Dee's grandson Nelson. "Do you use any red in the beard of a saint? If you do, is it terribly red or faint? Do you use any blue? Is it Prussian?" "I paint what I paint," said Rivera. "Whose is that head that I see on my wall?" said John Dee's grandson Nelson. "Is it anyone's head whom we know at all? A Rensselaer or a Saltonstall? Is it Franklin D? Is it Mordaunt Hall? Or is it the head of a Russian?" "I paint what I think," said Rivera. "I paint what I paint. I paint what I see. I paint what I think," said Rivera. "And the thing that is dearest in life to me, in a bourgeois hall, is integrity. However, I'll take out a couple of people drinking and put in a picture of Abraham Lincoln. I could even give you McCormick's Reaper and still not make my art much cheaper. But the head of Lenin has got to stay, or my friends will give me the bird today. The bird forever." "It's not good taste in a man like me," said John Dee's grandson Nelson, "to question an artist's integrity or mention a practical thing like a fee. But I know what I like to a large degree, though art I hate to hamper. For 21,000 conservative bucks, you painted a radical. I say shucks. I never could rent the offices, the capitalistic offices. For this, as you know, is a public hall, and people want doves or a tree in fall. And though your art I dislike to hamper, I owe a little to God and Gramper. And after all, it is my wall." "We'll see if it is," said Rivera. The Sea and the Wind That Blows. This little essay was first published in the Ford Times, an odd place to find a piece on the maritime world. My dad's compulsion about boats and sailing was passed on to me big time, to the point that my life and livelihood revolve about the boating world. To a lesser degree than he, I inherited his trepidation about going to sea, and so this piece speaks directly to me each time I read it. The last paragraph says it all. Waking or sleeping, I dream of boats, usually of rather small boats under a slight press of sail. When I think how great a part of my life has been spent dreaming the hours away, and how much of this total dream life has concerned small craft, I wonder about the state of my health, for I am told it is not a good sign to be always voyaging into unreality, driven by imaginary breezes. I have noticed that most men, when they enter a barber shop and must wait their turn, drop into a chair and pick up a magazine. I simply sit down and pick up the thread of my sea wandering, which began more than 50 years ago and is not quite ended. There is hardly a waiting room in the East that has not served as my cockpit, whether I was waiting to board a train or to see a dentist. And I am usually still trimming sheets when the train starts or the drill begins to whine. If a man must be obsessed by something, I suppose a boat is as good as anything, perhaps a bit better than most. A small sailing craft is not only beautiful, it is seductive and full of strange promise and the hint of trouble. If it happens to be an auxiliary cruising boat, it is without question the most compact and ingenious arrangement for living ever devised by the restless mind of man. A home that is stable without being stationary, shaped less like a box than like a fish, or a bird, or a girl, and in which the homeowner can remove his daily affairs as far from shore as he has the nerve to take them, close-hauled or running free. Parlor, bedroom, and bath, suspended and alive. Men who ache all over for tidiness and compactness in their lives often find relief for their pain in the cabin of a 30-foot sailboat at anchor in a sheltered cove. Here the sprawling panoply of the home is compressed in orderly miniature and liquid delirium, suspended between the bottom of the sea and the top of the sky, ready to move on in the morning by the miracle of canvas and the witchcraft of rope. It is small wonder that men hold boats in the secret place of their mind, almost from the cradle to the grave. Along with my dream of boats has gone the ownership of boats, a long succession of them upon the surface of the sea, many of them makeshift and crank. Since childhood, I have managed to have some sort of sailing craft and to raise a sail in fear. Now, in my 70s, I still own a boat, still raise my sail in fear in answer to the summons of the unforgiving sea. Why does the sea attract me in the way it does? Whence comes this compulsion to hoist a sail, actually or in dream? My first encounter with the sea was a case of hate at first sight. I was taken at the age of 4 to a bathing beach in New Rochelle. Everything about the experience frightened and repelled me. The taste of salt in my mouth, the foul chill of the wooden bathhouse, the littered sand, the stench of the tide flats. I came away hating and fearing the sea. Later, I found that what I had feared and hated, I now feared and loved. I returned to the sea of necessity because it would support a boat. And although I knew little of boats, I could not get them out of my thoughts. I became a pelagic boy. The sea became my unspoken challenge. The wind, the tide, the fog, the ledge, the bell, the gull that cried help, the never-ending threat and bluff of weather. Once having permitted the wind to enter the belly of my sail, I was not able to quit the helm. It was as though I had seized hold of a high-tension wire and could not let go. I liked to sail alone. The sea was the same as a girl to me. I did not want anyone else along. Lacking instruction, I invented ways of getting things done, and usually ended by doing them in a rather queer fashion, and so did not learn to sail properly, and still cannot sail well, although I have been at it all my life. I was 20 before I discovered that charts existed. All my navigating up to that time was done with the wariness and the ignorance of the early explorers. I was 30 before I learned to hang a coiled halyard on its cleat as it should be done. Until then, I simply coiled it down on deck and dumped the coil. I was always in trouble and always returned seeking more trouble. Sailing became a compulsion. There lay the boat, swinging to her mooring. There blew the wind. I had no choice but to go. My earliest boats were so small that when the wind failed, or when I failed, I could switch to manual control. I could paddle or row home. But then I graduated to boats that only the wind was strong enough to move. When I first dropped off my mooring in such a boat, I was an hour getting up the nerve to cast off the pennant. Even now, with 1,000 little voyages notched in my belt, I still feel a memorial chill on casting off, as the gulls jeer and the empty mainsail claps. Of late years, I have noticed that my sailing has increasingly become a compulsive activity rather than a simple source of pleasure. There lies the boat, there blows the morning breeze. It is a point of honor now to go. I am like an alcoholic who cannot put his bottle out of his life. With me, I cannot not sail. Yet I know well enough that I have lost touch with the wind, and in fact do not like the wind anymore. It jiggles me up, the wind does. In what I really love are windless days when all is peace. There is a great question in my mind whether a man who is against wind should longer try to sail a boat. But this is an intellectual response. The old yearning is still in me, belonging to the past, to youth. And so I am torn between past and present, a common disease of later life. When does a man quit the sea? How dizzy, how bumbling must he be? Does he quit while he's ahead, or wait till he makes some major mistake, like falling overboard, or being flattened by an accidental jibe? This past winter, I spent hours arguing the question with myself. Finally, deciding that I had come to the end of the road, I wrote a note to the boatyard, putting my boat up for sale. I said I was coming off the water, but as I typed the sentence, I doubted that I meant a word of it. If no buyer turns up, I know what will happen. I will instruct the yard to put her in again, just till somebody comes along. And then there will be the old uneasiness, the old uncertainty, as the mild southeast breeze ruffles the cove, a gentle, steady morning breeze, bringing the taint of the distant, wet world, the smell that takes a man back to the very beginning of time, linking him to all that has gone before. There will lie the sloop. There will blow the wind. Once more I will get underway. And as I reach across to the Red Nun off the Tory Islands, dodging the trap buoys and toggles, the shags gathered on the ledge will note my passage. There goes the old boy again, they will say. One more rounding of his little horn, one more conquest of his roaring 40s. And with the tiller in my hand, I'll feel again the wind imparting life to a boat. Will smell again the old menace, the one that imparts life to me. The cruel beauty of the salt world, the barnacle's tiny knives, the sharp spine of the urchin, the stinger of the sunjelly, the claw of the crab. This poem, Natural History, was written by my father to my mother, a love poem. At the time of Dad's death in 1985, the family decided to include this poem, printed alongside of a wonderful picture of Dad seated on a single rope swing, the silken strand, in a leaflet handed out to those attending the service. The spider, dropping down from twig, unwinds the thread of her devising, a thin premeditated rig to use in rising. And all the journey down through space, in cool descent and loyal-hearted, she builds a ladder to the place from which she started. Thus I, gone forth, as spiders do, in spider's web a truth discerning, attach one silken strand to you for my returning.